Creation in peril. We acknowledge that unsustainable human activities have placed the entirety of God's creation in peril. Further, we confess that the degradation and wholesale destruction of the natural environment threatens unprecedented harm, bringing danger to human and non-human life alike. Global warming and climate change. Global warming and climate change are already creating extreme conditions that threaten the entirety of life on Earth. Over-industrialization, widespread deforestation, and over-reliance on fossil fuels are but some of the human activities that have contributed to the build-up of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide in the Earth's atmosphere. A sharp upsurge in greenhouse gases over past decades already has resulted in a steady rise in sea levels, growing acidification of the world's oceans, increased droughts and famines, and the intensification of extreme weather events. Climate scientists warn that the window of opportunity for reversing the negative effects of global warming and climate change is rapidly closing. Without concerted action by individuals, churches, communities, shareholders, businesses, governments, and international organizations, the negative effects will become irreversible.
The social principle of the United Methodist Church. The social principles are not church law. Instead, they represent the prayerful and earnest efforts of the General Conference to speak to issues in the contemporary world from a sound biblical and theological foundation that is in keeping with the best of our United Methodist traditions. The social principles are thus a call to faithfulness and to social engagement and intended to be instructive and persuasive in the best of the prophetic spirit. Moreover, they challenge all members of the United Methodist Church to engage in deliberative reflection and encourage intentional dialogue between faith and practice. Community of all creation. The great lesson that our blessed Lord inculcates here is that God is in all things and that we are to see the Creator in the glass of every creature, that we should use and look upon nothing as separate from God, who pervades and actuates the whole created frame and is in a true sense the soul of the universe. We affirm that all creation belongs to God and is a manifestation of God's goodness and providential care. Human beings, non-human, animals, plants, and other conscious and unconscious beings participate in the community of creation, and their flourishing depends on the care of all God's creation. Rather than treating creation as if it were placed here solely for humanity's use and consumption, we are called to practice responsible stewardship and to live in right relationship with the Creator and with the whole of God's creation. We are also called to honor the role of every part of creation in healing the whole. Thus, we praise God with the whole of creation and recognize that we are part of complex ecosystems, all valued by God. We affirm our sacred calling to be responsible stewards and to lovingly tend all that God has wrought. We recognize the inherent worth of God's creation, celebrate Earth's abundance and diversity, and along with the entirety of the cosmos, give praise to its Creator. We recognize we are interconnected members of complex ecosystems, intricate webs of life, all of which have their origins in God's gracious act of creation.
Stewardship of creation. In Genesis 1, we read that God declares creation good. And we read in Genesis 2 that God took the human and settled him in the Garden of Eden to farm it and to take care of it. The goodness of God's creation and the value given to every part of it call people to respect, protect, and care for the creation and all interrelated aspects of it. Environmental racism. We confess that the negative impacts resulting from the degradation of the natural world have fallen disproportionately on marginalized communities, including indigenous tribes, religious and ethnic communities, people living in poverty, and other vulnerable groups. We, therefore, pledge to resist all forms of environmental exploitation, neglect, and inequality. These practices condemn impoverished communities and developing countries to bear the brunt of hazardous environments, industrial pollution, toxic waste dumps, and urban decay. Such behaviors constitute environmental racism. We oppose policies and practices that relegate marginalized communities to a permanent underclass status and ignore indigenous and to other sources of communal wisdom which call for air, land, and water to be treated with profound respect. Additionally, this group suffer disproportionately from higher rates of asthma, cancer, birth defects, and other preventable medical conditions. These health problems are associated with pollutants and other chemicals in soil, water, and air that affect our drinking water, foods, and physical environment. We urge governments, businesses, and civic institutions to give priority to increasing access to prevention and treatment services. We call for the institution of environmentally just principles, policies, and practices. We affirm the wisdom and agency of indigenous peoples and marginalized population to determine for themselves practices and policies that best provide for the basic needs or human needs including food, water, shelter, and land free from toxic waste. Self-determination entails, among other things, access to all pertinent information and significant decision-making power over industrial, agricultural, and other developments that have potential to wreak significant harm on land, air, and water. Sustainable policies and practices. Sustainability is crucial to the development of ecologically sound policies and practices that seek to restore balance to the natural world and end the disruptive relationships between humanity and the rest of God's creation. Sustainable policies and practices aim to meet present human needs while ensuring that future generations have the resources they need to thrive. Sustainable policies and practices prioritize the protection of all forms of life and national ecosystem, while supporting human beings to live in healthy balance with the earth. We urge United Methodists to adopt sustainable habits and practices, including refraining from overconsumption, reposing, and recycling materials, avoiding products that pollute or otherwise harm the environment, and reducing the carbon footprints of individuals and families by reducing overall reliance on fossil fuels for heat, transportation, and other goods. Recognizing that simply changing our personal habits will not be enough to reverse decades of environmental damage, the Church supports local, regional, national, and international cooperative efforts aimed at redressing the ecological harms humans have wreaked on a global scale. Such cooperative efforts must include the developmental and enforcement of policies and practices that protect all sentient beings, and the promotion of sustainable economic development. We also encourage responsible consumption and urgent actions against global warming and climate change. Food justice. Food systems that are ecologically sustainable, locally oriented, and equitably distributed are urgent priorities. We endorse policies and practices designed to ensure access to healthy nourishment and clean drinking water, especially for communities that have been subjected to environmental degradation or deprived of adequate resources to produce or purchase their own product. We also affirm food sovereignty, which promotes the right of all people to healthy, culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods. We support local control of food production, which entails providing opportunities for local communities to participate meaningfully in decisions about the kinds of livestock to be raised and crops to be grown. We reject agricultural policies and practices that make food inaccessible to agricultural workers and the communities in which the food is produced. We advocate for strong protections of the land, food, and water rights of indigenous peoples. We oppose the patenting of seed, varieties, and other organisms traditionally used in farming and agriculture. The rapidly expanding practice of patenting seed, varieties, and charging farmers for their use has reduced access to traditional crops and increased the indebtedness of subsistence and smaller scale farms. Consequently, we support cooperative, open source effort aimed at making traditional seed varieties available to those who need them. We also call for the creation of policies that reduce carbon-intensive agricultural methods which increase climate change. Producers must be responsible for their adverse impact on food packaging, distribution, and transport, and seek the safety and well-being of agricultural and food processing workers.
Caring for all creatures. We support the respectful and humane treatment of animals who are crucial participants in God's ongoing creation and of inherent worth. We embrace biblical teachings that envision a time when humans and other creatures shall live in peace and harmony in a restored creation. This commitment to respectful and humane treatment of animals means, for instance, putting in place protection to ensure that animals employed in agricultural and other forms of labor are free from cruel or abusive types of treatment and provided with ample rest and nourishment. Additionally, we oppose forcing animals to combat each other. Animal raised for human consumption should be provided with healthy living conditions and sufficient food and water. Animals raised for human consumption must likewise be reared in humane condition and slaughtered in a manner that minimizes their overall suffering and pain. With respect to creatures living in the wild, we urge cooperative efforts by international bodies, governments, civic institutions, churches, and concerned individuals and groups to end poaching and protect endangered and vulnerable species and preserve dwindling habitats. We decry the mass extinction currently underway and call the adoption of sustainable policies and practices that allow both animals and human life to flourish. protecting space. God's creation encompasses not only the earth but the entire cosmos, including space. Our charge to be responsible stewards thus extends well beyond humankind's immediate environs and encompasses not only our own solar system but also other galaxies. Hence, we reject the exploitation, commodification, and militarization of space. We express our hope that the exploration and settlement of space, including the moon and the other planetary bodies, takes place peacefully and cooperatively, and in such fashion that the benefits and resources of any further exploration and development accrue to all humanity. Affirming science and traditional wisdom, we affirm the value of science and reason in providing deeper understandings of the origins and functioning of the cosmos. We also now acknowledge that, like all human endeavors, science can be misused and abused. We, therefore, urge all those involved in scientific investigations to adhere to the highest ethical standards in conducting research and applying their findings. We also affirm the traditional wisdom found within indigenous communities, particularly the emphasis that native First Peoples have placed on living in harmony and balance with the earth and other animals, as well as the need to protect the air, land, and water.